On June 26, 2014, the Denver Nuggets would make a decision that would change the course of history for their franchise. With the 41st pick, the Denver Nuggets selected a 6'10", 19-year-old big man out of Serbia. Not only did this draft choice go unnoticed by the rest of the world, but ESPN didn't even televise it because they played a Taco Bell commercial when the Denver Nuggets made this pick instead. Jokic would go on to become a two-time MVP. It turned the Denver Nuggets into one of the top teams in the Western Conference. With how well he's panned out, he's arguably the greatest draft steal of all time. But how did this happen? How did 40 players get selected before Nikola Jokic did? Do the Denver Nuggets have a crystal ball? Was the rest of the league terrible at scouting? In this video, you're going to find out how an all-time great managed to slip through the cracks during the 2014 draft. For starters, one of the main reasons Nikola Jokic fell all the way down to the 41st pick during the 2014 draft was due to his lack of athleticism. Back in 2014, scouts thought Nikola Jokic was a skilled and talented player, but they viewed his lack of speed and athleticism as a huge concern. They viewed him as a mobile big man that could get up and down the court, but they saw his lack of quickness and vertical jumping ability as a huge weakness. They believed this lack of athleticism would turn Jokic into a bad defender in the NBA. They thought his lack of leaping ability would make it difficult for him to protect the rim, and they believed his lack of foot speed would make it difficult for him to defend the perimeter. So overall, teams thought Jokic's poor athleticism would make him a bad defender and outweigh what he did bring on the offensive end. Because of this, teams didn't think he had a high upside, and they thought that if he did stick around in the NBA long term, it would be as a backup center. Here's what Bleacher Report wrote about Nikola Jokic back in 2014. Jokic's upside isn't too spectacular because he's a below average athlete, so he'll have to focus on utilizing his skill set and operating as an efficient shooter and passer within a system. Boy, were they wrong. Bleacher Report didn't think he had a high upside, yet we all know he would become an all-time great player. But to be fair to those scouts back in 2014, they were right about Nikola Jokic having defensive issues due to his lack of athleticism. Even to this day, as a two-time MVP, Nikola Jokic isn't a very good defender. Jokic does have great size at 6'11" with a 7'3" wingspan, but his poor leaping ability makes it tough for him to contest shots at the rim. The fact of the matter is, the higher you can jump, the higher you can get up to block shots, and most of the elite shot blockers in the league, whether it's Anthony Davis, Jaren Jackson Jr., or Robert Williams, tend to have high verticals. Furthermore, Jokic still has poor foot speed, and this tends to hurt him when guarding the perimeter. Now, to be fair to Jokic, he has improved defensively over the years. He does get a lot of steals, and he's elite on the boards. But rim protection is the most important skill for a big man on a defensive end, and Jokic doesn't add much value as a rim protector. Furthermore, teams often target Jokic in pick and rolls because he gets exposed when he has to show out to the perimeter. Jokic had his defensive shortcomings, but he's become one of the greatest offensive players in the history of the league, which more than makes up for what he lacks on defense. Even back in 2014, the scouts knew that Jokic was gifted on the offensive end. They knew he had a high basketball IQ and a great feel for the game, and they were also high on his shooting ability and scoring touchdown low. The scouts knew that Jokic was a good offensive player, but they had no idea he would become a great one. With Jokic, teams envisioned him as a stretch big man and a good passer. They had no idea that he would not only become a player that could be the hub of a team's offense, but ultimately create a player archetype that the league had never seen before, which is essentially a point center. To the Joker's credit, he's worked incredibly hard and has improved a lot since he was drafted into the league. He's gotten stronger and gotten more fit, and he's become a dominant post-up player and an incredible shooter. It was hard to foresee in the 2014 draft that Jokic was going to add this much to his game. All in all, the scouts saw Jokic as a skilled offensive big man who was a defensive liability, and as a result, they saw him as a career backup center at best. What teams didn't realize was that Jokic was going to become an incredible scorer and playmaker while using his fast hands and IQ to lower his deficiencies on the defensive end. While NBA teams and NBA scouts were incredibly wrong about the caliber of player that Jokic will become, they were spot on about his weaknesses, but they had no idea that he would improve this much. Another big reason 40 players were taken before Jokic was because Jokic was drafted before he played his best basketball in the Adriatic League. Even though Jokic was taken in the 2014 draft, he didn't play in the NBA until the 2015-16 season. The Adriatic League is a professional basketball league that consists of 14 teams from the former Yugoslavia nations. Back in the 2013-14 season, he played in the Serbian league where he averaged 10 points, 6 boards, and 3 assists per game. But while he played well, it wasn't until next year after he was drafted by the Nuggets when he dominated. In the 2014-15 season, he would average 15 points, a league-leading 9.3 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game, and was named the MVP of the Adriatic League. After that season, he left his hometown of Serbia to pursue his NBA career. So a huge part of the reason Jokic was slept on was because he was taken before his breakout season. Had Jokic waited until 2015 to declare for the draft, he would have easily have been a first-round pick. In fact, Jokic's agent was planning to pull him out of the 2014 draft and was planning to declare him for the draft next year. But the Nuggets convinced his agent to reconsider and guarantee that they would select him with the 41st pick. The Nuggets were impressed with what they saw from Jokic at the Nike Hoops Summit, an annual showcase of prospects inside the Blazers practice facility. And as discussed before, teams were turned off by his lack of athleticism, but the Nuggets were impressed with his shooting, scoring, and guard-like ball handling skills. Because Jokic was drafted before his breakout season in Serbia, teams didn't realize how truly gifted he was. But even after that monster season overseas, he was still a backup center his rookie year in the NBA. In fact, it wasn't until his 4th year in the league that Jokic established himself as a legit all-star. Jokic didn't set the world on fire as a first-year player, but he was all-rookie team and was 3rd in Rookie of the Year voting. The next season is when Jokic would really start to turn heads. In the 2016-17 season, the Nuggets had another Balkan talented big man named Jusuf Nurkic. Nurkic played well for the Nuggets, but head coach Mike Malone could see that Jokic was the superior talent. On December 15, 2016, Mike Malone gave Jokic the starting center position over Nurkic. And a few months later, the Nuggets would trade Nurkic to the Trail Blazers. And this decision proved to be a great move because Jokic would break out that season with averages of 17 points, 10 boards, and 5 assists per game while winning the 2017 Most Improved Player of the Year award. And by next season, Jokic would establish himself as the franchise player with averages of 18 points, 11 boards, and 6 assists per game, nearly getting the Nuggets to the playoffs, but losing to the Timberwolves on the final game of the regular season. But even though that season ended on a sour note, he would go on to become one of the NBA's premier players, making 4 All-Star teams, 3 All-NBA teams, winning 2 MVPs, and getting the Nuggets to the conference finals in 2020. Overall, while almost every team ended up being wrong about Jokic during the 2014 draft, it's understandable why he fell to the 41st pick. He was a very gifted offensive player, but also a very unathletic big man with defensive shortcomings. Teams also didn't think that Nikola Jokic's offense would expand as much as it did, and thought he would be a defensive liability, which would make him max out as a career backup center. He was a draft and stash pick by the Nuggets, and his stash season was much better than before the year he was drafted. The Nuggets front office deserves all the credit in the world for seeing past his weaknesses and identifying his talent, and Nikola Jokic, of course, also deserves a ton of credit for improving his weaknesses and optimizing his strengths, because that has ultimately made him an all-time great. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for me. What do you think is the main reason Nikola Jokic fell to the second round? Tell me in the comments. If you want to stay up to date on Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets, then this is the place to be. So please, if you enjoyed the video, drop a like on it and hit that subscribe button. The way Nikola Jokic is playing right now, he can make history by winning his 3rd consecutive MVP. Click this video to see an in-depth analysis on Nikola Jokic's MVP level play.